So after gametogenesis, let us begin with the first week, and the first week is all about the fertilization and implantation. So you'll find a lot of questions asked from this first week also. So we're going to talk about the first week, and we said first week is the week for the fertilization and implantation. Week of fertilization and implantation. So to guys, to understand this first week, let us say this is the section for the fallopian tube, the fundus and the body of the uterus. I'm just purposefully drawing it bigger so that we can clearly see the stages inside. Day 1. Now I'll be writing all the days like this: D1, D2, D3. Day 1, let us say that day 1 is the day for fertilization. Day 1 is the day for the fertilization. You can say day 1 is the day 1 of ovulation, also is the day 1. The gap could be of maximum 24 hours, so it doesn't matter. I mean, whether you say the day 1 is the day of ovulation or the day of fertilization. So in our case, let's consider it as a day 1, the day of fertilization. So the first question is that where exactly the fertilization takes place. So guys, fertilization takes place in the ampulla of the fallopian tube. Well, the better answer is ampuloisthmic junction. So more precisely, the fertilization takes place usually in the ampuloisthmic junction. So that is one question here. The site for the fertilization, the better answer than ampulla is ampuloisthmic junction. Once the fertilization takes place, what you'll see, there is a formation of this so-called zygote. The formation of the zygote. Well, zygote, the true zygote is a single cell stage, but in human we never had that single cell stage. It was like the male and the female pronuclei, they start fusing with each other, and before it become one single cell stage, the cleavage begins. So the division actually starts from the undifferentiated 2-cell stage only. So zygote in human is not a true zygote, it is like undifferentiated 2-cell stage only. And this zygote, it is covered with this glycoprotein belt called as zona pellucida. This is zona pellucida. What is zona pellucida? It is a acellular glycoprotein belt. It is acellular glycoprotein belt. So structurally, it's a glycoprotein belt which you see around the conceptus. Well, we said acellular, zona pellucida. Zona, as we know the word zona, and pellucida is for the translucent. So there is a translucent belt which is present around the pellucid belt which is present around the conceptus. What is the function of the zona pellucida? Now, first of all, zona pellucida, it prevents the polyspermy. When the fertilization takes place, only one sperm is allowed to enter inside, and then there is something called a zonal reaction, and that will actually block all the other receptors for the sperm, and that is called as a zonal reaction. So one thing zona pellucida is doing, that it is preventing polyspermy. So number one, it prevents polyspermy. And number two, when this conceptus is running through the fallopian tube, this is also preventing the conceptus to implant. I mean, implantation should take place within the uterus or close to the fundus, not in the fallopian tube, right? Otherwise, it's an ectopic pregnancy. So this zona pellucida is not allowing this sticky conceptus to implant anywhere in the fallopian tube and leading to the tubal pregnancy. So it also prevents ectopic implantation. It also prevents ectopic implantation. So that's what the zona pellucida is doing. It is preventing polyspermy, number one, and then it is also preventing the ectopic implantation, the two main functions of this glycoprotein belt around the conceptus. The zygote will undergo the cleavage. So the cleavage begins. Let me just write CL here, that is the cleavage begins. And as a result of the cleavage, the 2-cell stage becomes a 3-cell stage, it becomes 4-cell stage, 5, 6, so on. The multiplication goes on and on. And then comes a time when we have anything more than 8-cell stage. I mean, it could be 8 to 16, few says 16 to 32. Well, when it looks like a mulberry, we start calling it what? Morula. That's called as morula. And whether it is 8 to 16 cell stage, as few author called 8 to 16 cell stage, few says 16 to 32 cell stage, well, they are all morula. You cannot give a definite number to the morula. You cannot just say that only 8 cell stage is morula, or what about 20 cell stage or 22 cell stage. They're all morula. When it looks like mulberry, we call it morula only. But for the question's point of view, if the question is asked that what stage is morula, the best answer would be the 16 cell stage, the number which almost everyone is agreeing on, 8 to 16 or 16 to 32 or even 16 to 64. So 16 is one number which is kind of constant to all the authors. So I would say 16 is your better answer if you have to choose one best answer for the number of cells in the morula. And then comes few important questions here, guys. First of all, what day the conceptus will enter into the uterine cavity? Please be careful. I'm not asking what day it implants. I'm asking on what day it enters the uterine cavity. So the answer is, the best answer is day 4. It could be day 3 to day 4, but day 4 is the best answer here. So on day 4, this conceptus is entering into the uterine cavity. Let me write the word enters. It's all about entering. And by the time it enters, what stage will that be? I mean, is it morula entering into the uterine cavity or something else? Well, it is morula only. We call it late morula or we call it advanced morula. There is a late morula or so-called advanced morula. Well, the reason we call it advanced morula or late morula, because what you see, by this time, the cells organize themselves in two fashion. You will see the outer cell mass. Let's say if I'm using a red color here, there is an outer cell mass. You can see zona pellucida is still there. This is outer cell mass. And then we have this inner cell mass. These are inner cell mass, the outer and the inner cell mass. So that's what the late morula is. But yeah, if the question is asked that which cell stage it enters the uterine cavity, please understand all these questions. The day it enters the uterine cavity is 4th day, 3 to 4, enters the uterine cavity. What enters the uterine cavity? That stage is morula only. You can call it late morula or advanced morula. What cell stage enter the uterine cavity? Then your better answer would be 32 cell stage. It's 32 celled morula which enters the uterine cavity. That is an advanced morula which is divided into outer cell mass and the inner cell mass. Outer cell mass and the inner cell mass. Now the two function of zona pellucida is over. I mean the job of zona pellucida is done. So what zona pellucida, this zona pellucida will disappear. The zona pellucida disappear. Disappearance of the zona pellucida basically is like we are hatching the this conceptus from outside of the zona pellucida. This is also called as a zonal hatching. This is also referred as zonal hatching. When the zona pellucida disappear and the conceptus will come out of the zona pellucida, we call it zonal hatching. So guys, let me just put these dotted lines here to represent the zona pellucida which disappeared. Now once the zona pellucida disappear, now look at this. We said this is the outer cell mass, right? This is the outer cell mass. Still no implantation. This is the outer cell mass. And because the zona pellucida disappears, now what will happen? The uterine fluid will enter inside. The uterine fluid will invade inside, guys. And once the uterine fluid enters inside, the entire inner cell mass is pushed to one corner. Look at that. The entire inner cell mass is pushed to one corner. So clearly you can see now the cavity is formed inside because of this uterine fluid entering inside. The inner cell mass is pushed to one side and the cavity is formed inside. The cavity is what? It's a seal. And that's why we now call it what? Blastocyst. The conceptus with the cavity, that is blastocyst. That is blastocyst. And this blastocyst, this stage blastocyst is answer to so many questions which are asked in the exam. Let me just put them one by one. You can write it separately wherever you find the space. First of all, blastocyst is the stage for implantation. Blastocyst is the stage for the implantation. Implantation stage is the blastocyst, not before that. Number two, what is the day of implantation? Which day the implantation takes place, guys? Implantation takes place on 6th day. Implantation takes place on the 6th day. Although this number should not be, it's not the only day the implantation takes place. Few book has quoted as day 7 also. In some books like Guyton, they have mentioned like day 5 to day 12. It can be, implantation can be in any of these days. But yeah, the single best answer, the most accepted answer here is the 6th day. Most of the time the implantation takes place on 6th day. And please understand, these are two different questions. When you say implantation takes place on which day is 6th day. But implantation completes on which day? On what day the conceptus or the blastocyst completely invades the endometrium and then covered with the decidua? So guys, that day is the implantation completes. Implantation completes on 10th day. Based on the standard text that says the 10th day is the day for the completion of implantation. Another question. What is the type of implantation, guys? What is the type of implantation human exhibit? As I just said, that conceptus enters the uterine cavity and completely invades the endometrium. So it is a type of interstitial implantation. In certain mammals, implantation takes place, but it is not a complete implantation. Conceptus half goes inside the endometrium, half stays inside the uterine cavity throughout the pregnancy. But in human being, it all goes inside the endometrium and we call it interstitial implantation. That is interstitial implantation. That's the type of implantation. Another question, what is the site for the implantation? The most common site for the implantation is the junction of posterior wall of fundus and body of the uterus. It's not the posterior wall of fundus, it is a junction of posterior wall of fundus and body of the uterus. Site for the implantation, the best answer is, it is a junction of posterior wall of fundus and body of uterus. Junction of posterior wall of fundus and body of the uterus. And finally, one more question here, and that also is a recently asked question, that what is the cell stage that we use to extract the embryonic stem cells from? So if you want to take an embryonic stem cells, where will you take it from? You will take it from the blastocyst only. So this is the stage for the embryonic stem cells. This is the stage for the embryonic stem cells. So you can see there are so many questions which can be asked from this blastocyst itself. The stage of implantation, it is like which day implantation takes place, completion of implantation, type, site, and also the embryonic stem cells are extracted from where? That answer is again blastocyst. So guys, this is about the first week of embryogenesis, in which we just talked about the fertilization and the implantation. And I'm sure by looking at this picture only, you can make out there are so many important questions which can be asked, which were asked in the exam and probably in the future also. And once again, I would like to make you aware of especially that part when it enters the uterine cavity. You've got a lot of questions there. That which date enters the uterine cavity, the 4th day enters, what stage it enters the uterine cavity, how many cell stage it enters the uterine cavity. So there are like a lot of questions from this part. So just be careful about this region here. So this is about the first week of embryogenesis. So let's now begin with the second week of the embryogenesis, which is all about the formation of bilaminar germ disc. So the embryology which I was talking about, that you should be very well aware of, which is like a story one step after another, which will start from the second week. So whatever we'll discuss from the second week onwards, you got to be very focused about it, and this will just build like a story for you.